Whatever you know or believe you know about World War II, there are always more terrible things hiding in the shadows. This is true regardless of how much you know about the war. Despite the fact that we are all aware that the war years were a dreadful time, let's speak about some of the screwed up things that actually occurred during World War II, but are typically omitted from history books. The serial killer who preyed on Jews trying to escape France. Marcel Petiot was his name, and no one knows how many people he killed. He was born in 1897, that much we know. He had a total breakdown during World War I, but he went on to get a medical degree after the war, even though doctors told him he should be locked up for mental health reasons. He began working as a doctor in Villeneuve, France, and was even chosen mayor. Some people didn't die for no clear reason until the 1930s. During World War II, Petiot saw a great chance and started a plan in which he would offer to help Jews escape the Nazis. Having told them they were going to South America, he would give them a vaccine. The shot was poison, and after they were dead, he took everything they owned, cut up their bodies, and sent letters to family members saying they were safe and would be back as soon as possible. He was charged with 27 killings, found guilty of 26, and admitted to 60. David King, who wrote Death in the City of Light, the serial killer of Nazi-occupied Paris, told Reuters that he may have killed up to 150 people. Petiot was caught after police and firefighters went to a home that smelled like smoke and found body parts lying around. It's no surprise that he was called Dr. Satan. In 1946, he was put to death by the guillotine. The war's underage soldiers. You were 12 years old. Do you remember what you did? He was in the military and served on the USS South Dakota. In 1942, he dropped out of 7th grade to go to basic training, and he said, "I took belts off the dead and made tourniquets for the living." He was in the naval battle of Guadalcanal. He turned 13 not long ago. As the Smithsonian says, Graham's story wasn't a happy one. When the Navy found out how old he was, they took away his medals, put him in jail for a while, and then kicked him out of the service without an honorable discharge. Even though he died in 1992, his family didn't get their benefits and awards back until 1994. He was one of those baby vets who grew up too fast. Jack Lucas lied his way into the service when he was 14. For his actions at Iwo Jima, he became the youngest person to receive the Medal of Honor via the Seattle Times. The Legion d'Honneur award was given to Roy Bradshaw of Britain when he was 16 for his service on D-Day via the Telegraph. The BBC also claimed that Reginald Earnshaw, Britain's youngest war dead, had been identified. He died while riding on the SS North Devon when he was 14 years old. Gerhard Kretschmar. The Telegraph wrote in 2003 that the boy's name, who was 5 months old at the time, was found to be Case K. That was his real name, Gerhard Kretschmar. He died because his parents asked Hitler to let them kill him. When Karl Brandt, Hitler's personal doctor, spoke at Nuremberg, he talked about Case K. He was sent to check out the boy in person because he was born blind and missing a leg and part of an arm. After the doctor gave the patient a drug that caused a slow death, Brandt says the event led to the creation of the T4 euthanasia program. These were the people Hitler said were unworthy of living, according to The Atlantic. More than 300,000 people with mental and physical disabilities, including newborn babies, were killed as part of this program. Doctors were told to report to the government any kids born with conditions like Down syndrome or epilepsy. Adults with these conditions were sent through a program with a strange name, the Charitable Foundation for Cure and Institutional Care. There was a baby whose parents, Richard and Lena Kretschmar, called him the Monster. The story is terrible from beginning to end. Les Femmes Tondues, the Shorn women. The freedom of towns across France should have been a happy day for everyone, but for many women, it turned into days of being shamed and embarrassed in public. As Allied troops drove the Germans out of the countryside of France, what The Guardian called ugly carnivals started. The women who were accused of collaboration horizontal had their heads shaved in town parks and were then pushed into trucks and walked through the streets. These people were being shamed because they slept with enemy forces, worked with Nazis, and chose the wrong side. They were sometimes covered in tar, painted with swastikas, and stripped of their clothes. During and after the occupation, France was full of stories. Women were said to have worked as spies and even as snipers for their German lovers. Most of the time, the fact was very different, and about 20,000 women were blamed for their part in the war instead of being praised for it. As the women walked through the streets, some had to turn their homes into bunkhouses for German soldiers, and mothers offered to feed their hungry children in exchange for favors. There are claims that some Parisian prostitutes were killed by being kicked because they had German clients. Vice says that in some cases, the collaboration horizontal may have been grape. The vivisection of 8 American POWs. Toshio Tono was a first-year medical student at Kyushu Imperial University in 1945. In an interview with The Guardian in 1985-2015, he said it was his job to make sure everyone knew about the horrible tests that were done on 8 American prisoners of war in the last few days of the war. After their B-29 Superfortress crashed, the guys were caught. 4 of the 12 were caught, but died before they could be caught. The other 10 were taken to Fukuoka. The prisoners of war were slowly led to the medical school's pathology field. Tono shared with The Guardian, "I did wonder if something unpleasant was going to happen to them, but I had no idea it was going to be that awful." Tono was the only person who saw the vivisections and lived to tell about them. He said that the men were injected with seawater to see if it could be used as a salt drip, and organs and parts of organs were taken out to see how long they could survive. Someone had a piece of their brain cut out to see if it would help with their seizures. For further study, the bodies were first kept in formaldehyde, but as the war ended, proof of the crimes was thrown away. Even though doctors were put on trial, no one was ever punished. Tono, whose job it was to clean the blood off the floor, now runs a maternity center and puts up pictures of the airmen so that they won't be forgotten. The Lebensborn. They say that Lebensborn means wellspring of life. That was also the name of Himmler's program to pick and choose which children to breed, so that the next generation would be able to lead a country of racially pure Nazis. In 1936, a Lebensborn home was opened in a small town outside of Munich. It had decor and potential mothers who were chosen by Himmler himself. This was the official start of the program. The program went through a few stages. The first was choosing men and women who could show they were racial pure and were willing to have a child that would be raised in SS camps. In 1939, the SS told its men to have as many racially pure kids as they could. By 1942, the same men were told they could also choose women who were not German as long as they looked the part. While the Nazis took over more of Europe, they often took tens of thousands of children who fit their racist ideas from their homes and sent to be Germanized through the Lebensborn program. They were told they had been left alone, taught Nazi ideas, and were then either taken in by SS families or labeled as bad and sent to death camps. Most likely, you've heard of Annefried Lyngstad, the lead singer of ABBA, who was born to a Lebensborn mother. Operation Mincemeat. According to the BBC, Operation Mincemeat began in 1943 when Glyndwr Michael died too soon. He killed himself with rat poison, which was the stated cause of his death. His body was found in a warehouse in London, but his body wasn't buried. After 3 months on ice, he came out with fake ID cards, like the one shown, personal things from a carefully thought-out backstory, and some top-secret papers. After that, he was thrown off the coast of Spain. Allies knew there were spies working in Spain and planned to use them to get those fake papers into the hands of the Germans. The plan worked out. The papers made it all the way to Hitler, who used them to send 90,000 forces to Greece. This made it possible for the Allies to take Sicily and move into Italy. It sounds like something from a James Bond movie, right? That's funny, because police officer Ian Fleming came up with the idea. Ireland's condemnation of the men who fought. A lot of people have different opinions on whether or not wars were important, but surely no one could argue with someone who helped stop the Nazis from taking over Europe. That's exactly what Ireland did. Then there was the Irish Free State. Ireland stayed neutral during the war, but reports from the Telegraph say that 42,000 men went to Britain to fight. This needs some background information for people who don't know much about Irish history. Ireland had only broken away from Britain about 20 years before. It was a long, terrible war that left a lot of hate on both sides. Men who left their home army to fight with the British were called deserters, and when they came back, they found that things had changed, at least not for them. A starvation order passed by the Irish government put the names of 5,000 Irish soldiers on it. The BBC talked to some of them. These guys fought in the Battle of the Bulge, helped free prisoners of war, and were on D-Day. When they got back, their neighbours hated them. They were fired from the army. Their benefits and pay were taken away, and people were told not to hire them based on a list of their names. Many had to leave again because they couldn't find work or feed their families. They didn't get out of their service until 2013. Race-based mustard gas tests in the US. NPR looked into the mustard gas tests that were done on American soldiers during World War II in 2015. Things are even worse than you think. The trials, which involved an amazing 60,000 enlisted men, were made public in 1993. A lot of the men were chosen just because they were black. This began with a group of white soldiers called the Control Group being exposed to different amounts of mustard gas to see what would happen. After that, the same tests were done on groups of races to see if there was a difference, and they were horrible experiments. Rollins Edwards was just following orders when he and a few others walked into a wooden room, only to find the door locked behind them and the room filling with gas. It felt like you were on fire. Finally, they opened the door and let us out, and the guys they were in bad shape, he said. To make matters worse, the tests weren't recorded in the soldiers' medical records. Also, NPR found that the VA hadn't even followed up with them about their health issues decades after they were exposed to chemicals that are known to cause leukemia, cancer, and emphysema. NPR said in 2016 that a soldier who had been in the tests and pushed for the government to admit them had died. Charles Cavell lived to be 89 years old. The Lidice Massacre and the man who survived. The town of Lidice was in what was then Czechoslovakia. It was there that Reinhard Heydrich, a high-ranking Nazi figure, was killed in 1942. What really went wrong was what happened after he was killed. The US Holocaust Memorial Museum says that SS and German cops came to Lidice on the night of Heydrich's funeral. The 500 people from the village were told to meet in the town square. All 192 boys and men were taken to the edge of town and put to death. Most of the women were sent to the Ravensbrück prison camp, where 60 of the 203 who were sent there died. Kids whose bodies were thought to be German were sent to go through Germanization, and 82 were sent to Chelmno's mobile gas chambers. 10 guys from Lidice who weren't there at the time were found and killed via medium. One exception. The author of the book I Served the King of England, Bohumil Hrabal, wrote about him. A historian from the Military Historical Institute, Eduard Stehlik, confirmed the story via Radio Praha. František Seidel only made it through because he was locked up in Prague at the time. The former deputy mayor of Lidice was in prison for murder. He got out a few months after the Lidice massacre and went home to find his valley empty. He even gave himself to the Gestapo, but they were no longer interested. In Lidice, he was the only man who made it out alive because he had killed his own son during a family fight. The Dachau medical experiments. Sigmund Rasche got along well with the Nazis when he married Heinrich Himmler's ex-secretary and possibly ex-mistress. The good doctor later went on to work at Dachau. In order to help Nazi science move forward, he did some of the scariest tests ever from 1941 to 1944. He was the crazy scientist who did crazy things like shooting prisoners to see if his new polygal changed how quickly their wounds heal. He also planned Dachau's human hypothermia study, in which people were put in ice water to see how quickly they would die and what kinds of ways to wake them up, like a warm bath or being submerged in boiling water, would work best, or worse. A summary of the study, published in the New England Journal of Medicine, says that these experiments have been the subject of heated discussion about whether or not data gathered by Nazi scientists should ever be used for good. And Rasche liked to collect human skin and make things like saddles and handbags, so there you have it. Luckily, he lost favor with Himmler and was put to death. Unit 731. The Telegraph says that Japan's mysterious Unit 731 tortured and tested on more than 10,000 people. The group is mysterious because no one is sure what the full scope of the experiments was. The government of Tokyo said in 2010 that they were looking into newly found remains that they thought belonged to people who died in Unit 731. Their information came from Toyo Ishii, a former nurse who was told to hide body parts and bones at the end of the war while working at a hospital. She said she had worked in a number of morgues where bodies and parts of bodies were kept after trials that included high-pressure chambers and live burials. Some parts of the Japanese government still say Unit 731 didn't exist, but Unit 731.org was created to gather witness stories and testimonies. They say that the horrible things that were done to thousands of people are still going on. These people were given the plague, anthrax, and cholera, were cut up while they were still alive, or were tied to stakes and used as test subjects for different kinds of chemical warfare. Some people sat outside in the cold and waited to die or have parts of themselves fall off. Really, the bad things never end, and those are just the ones we know about. We hope you liked this video. Watch another video here.